What would you do if your biggest dream and your biggest fear arrived on the same day? That was how I felt when I stood at the small airport in my city, holding a ticket to Tokyo. I had dreamed of seeing Japan since I was a teenager. I loved the idea of bright streets full of lights, peaceful temples, and cherry blossoms. But it was also my very first flight, and I had never traveled alone before. I kept asking myself if I was ready. I was 23 years old and had never left my own country. I felt proud to be going abroad for the first time, but my hands were cold and my heart was racing. The airport seemed bigger than I remembered. People moved quickly with heavy bags, families hugged, children cried, and voices filled the air around me. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, please subscribe so you never miss a new one. I checked my bag again and again. I carried my passport, my ticket, and my visa. I also had a small notebook where I wrote my feelings, in case I wanted to remember this day forever. My suitcase was light, but I still worried about the rules. I had read about airline limits, and I was afraid that my bag would be too heavy. At the counter, the woman smiled, took my passport, and gave me a boarding pass. When she put a sticker on my suitcase and sent it away on the moving belt, I felt a sudden shock. My things were gone, and I was truly on my own now. The security check was the part that made me the most nervous. I had to put my small bag, my jacket, and even my shoes into a gray tray. I watched them slide into the machine. I stepped through the scanner, waiting for a loud sound or a problem. But nothing happened, and the officer told me I could continue. I picked up my things with shaking hands. I told myself, you did it, one step closer to Tokyo. After immigration, I walked into the waiting area. It felt like a small city inside the airport. There were shops, lights, and restaurants. I wanted to explore, but I was afraid of missing my gate, so I only bought a small bottle of water. I sat near a large window and looked out at the airplanes. They stood like giant birds on the runway, white and silver against the gray morning sky. I tried to imagine myself inside one of them, flying high above the clouds. When my gate number appeared on the screen, my chest tightened. I walked slowly, afraid to make a mistake. At the gate, the staff checked my boarding pass and smiled. Then I walked through a tunnel that led to the airplane. I felt small and important at the same time. This was the beginning of my new life. Inside the plane, everything looked clean and bright. The air smelled fresh, and the cabin crew greeted me warmly. I found my seat by the window and placed my bag under the seat in front of me. I touched the seat belt many times before fastening it, making sure I did it correctly. I whispered to myself, this is it. The airplane started to move, slowly at first. My stomach turned as I heard the engines grow louder. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff. I closed my eyes, then opened them quickly, because I did not want to miss the moment. The plane rushed forward, faster and faster until the ground disappeared. I looked out of the window and saw the city below me become smaller and smaller. The streets turned into thin lines, the buildings into tiny dots. Soon we were above the clouds, soft and white like cotton. I felt both fear and wonder. I thought, I am flying. I am really flying to Tokyo. The flight was long, but I tried to enjoy every part of it. The crew served food and drinks. I ate slowly, tasting every bite as if it was part of my new experience. I watched a movie on the small screen in front of me, but I could not concentrate. My thoughts were louder than the sound of the film. What would Tokyo be like? Would I feel lonely in such a huge city? Would I be strong enough to manage everything by myself? When the plane finally began to descend, my heart beat fast again. The screen showed the map and the words, "Arrival, Tokyo." I pressed my face close to the window. At first, I saw only clouds and then water, wide and endless. Slowly, land appeared. I saw buildings stretching far into the distance, roads like rivers of light, and towers reaching high into the sky. Tokyo looked enormous, alive, and waiting for me. As we landed, the plane shook a little, and people clapped quietly. I smiled without meaning to. I had done it. My first flight was over, and I was in Japan. I wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. I had taken a step I never thought I could take. When I walked out of the plane, the air felt different. It was cool and clean. Signs in Japanese and English guided me toward immigration. My legs felt weak, but I kept moving. At the counter, the officer looked at my passport, asked a few short questions, and stamped it. The sound of the stamp was loud in my mind. It meant I was here, officially in Tokyo. I collected my suitcase from the moving belt and held it close. Everything felt strange, yet exciting. I followed the sign until I saw the exit doors. They opened slowly, and I stepped outside into a new world. The first thing I noticed was the mix of smells: fresh bread from a bakery, coffee from a cafe, and something sharp and clean in the air. I stood there, breathing deeply, letting the moment sink into me. For years, I had dreamed of Tokyo. Now it was no longer a dream. It was real, and it was mine. The first taxi ride in Tokyo felt like stepping into another life. The driver spoke polite Japanese, and I could only answer with a soft smile and the few words I had learned before my trip. Konnichiwa, hello, and arigato, thank you. The city outside the window moved quickly, a blur of lights, tall buildings, and wide streets. I had never seen so many people walking together with such quiet order. Cars stopped perfectly at red lights, and crowds crossed the street in clean lines. The ride from the airport to my hotel was nearly 1 hour, and I spent every minute with my face pressed to the window. I saw shops glowing with bright signs, small restaurants with red lanterns at the doors, and train stations full of rushing travelers. Even in the middle of the night, Tokyo seemed alive. I felt both small and safe in the middle of so much energy. When we reached my hotel, the driver helped me with my bag. I thanked him again and again. The hotel was small but clean, with a kind woman at the front desk. She handed me a key card and welcomed me in careful English. My room was on the 7th floor. When I opened the door, I saw a tiny but perfect space, with a low bed, a desk, and a wide window. Outside, the city lights stretched endlessly. I sat on the bed and whispered, "I am really here." That first night, I did not sleep well. My body was tired, but my mind was awake with excitement. I thought about my family at home, probably sleeping now. I wondered if they believed I was brave or if they worried about me. I wanted to tell them everything I saw, but I also wanted to hold the memory close for myself. In the morning, I woke early. The sun had already begun to rise, and Tokyo looked softer in the light. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this day was mine. I wanted to see this city, even if I got lost. I put on my jacket, tied my shoes, and left the hotel with a small map in my bag. The first thing I noticed on the street was the sound. Tokyo was busy, yet it was not noisy. People moved quickly, bicycles rolled past, but no one shouted. Even the cars seemed quiet. I walked to a small cafe on the corner, where I saw people sitting alone with steaming cups of coffee. I ordered a coffee and a small roll, pointing to the picture on the menu. The woman behind the counter smiled and nodded. The coffee tasted strong, and the bread was soft. For a moment, I felt like I belonged. After breakfast, I wanted to see the famous Shibuya crossing. I had read that it was the busiest crossing in the world. When I arrived, I stood at the corner with hundreds of other people. The lights turned green, and suddenly everyone moved at once. It felt like a dance of strangers. I walked forward, surrounded by people from everywhere. For the first time in my life, I did not feel alone in a crowd. I felt part of something bigger. Next, I went to a park near the city center. The tall trees stood silent and old, and the air smelled of pine. People walked slowly, some in business suits, some in casual clothes. There was a shrine with red gates, and I watched as visitors washed their hands and bowed quietly before entering. I did not know the words of their prayers, but I felt their peace. I stood still for a while, letting the calm cover me. Later that day, I tried the Tokyo subway. At first, I was afraid of the ticket machine. The buttons and maps were full of Japanese words I could not read. I pressed one by mistake and stepped back in panic. Then a young man came to help me. He showed me which ticket to buy and how to insert the coins. I thanked him again and again, feeling both grateful and embarrassed. The train arrived quickly, and I stepped inside. The seats were clean, and the passengers were quiet. I held my bag close and tried not to look too lost. When I got off at my stop, I walked into a busy street full of small shops. The smell of food was everywhere. I followed it until I found a stall selling hot noodles. I watched the cook drop noodles into a bowl, add soup, and sprinkle green onions on top. I bought a bowl and stood by the side, eating slowly. The broth was hot and salty, and the noodles were soft. It was the best meal I had ever eaten, not because of the taste alone, but because I had found it by myself in a new city. In the afternoon, I visited Asakusa, where the Sensoji Temple stood bright with red colors and golden lights. The path leading to the temple was lined with shops selling small gifts, sweets, and charms. I bought a tiny red charm for luck, slipping it into my bag as a secret reminder of this journey. The temple itself was crowded, yet I felt calm again. I watched smoke rise from incense, and I thought about my hopes for the future. As the evening came, I walked along the Sumida River. The water reflected the city lights, and boats passed slowly under bridges. Couples walked hand in hand, children laughed, and old people rested on benches. I sat down and opened my notebook. I wrote, "First day in Tokyo, I am afraid, but I am also free." That night, back in my hotel room, I looked out the window again. The city lights still glowed, but I felt different. The fear was still there, deep inside, but it was not as heavy as before. I had managed the subway, eaten local food, and found my way through crowded streets. I was beginning to believe in myself. On my second day, I visited Ueno Park. It was spring, and the cherry blossoms were opening. The trees looked like clouds of pink and white. Families sat on blue blankets under the trees, sharing food and laughter. I walked slowly, taking pictures, but I also wanted to remember it with my eyes and heart, not only with my camera. The petals fell around me, and I held one in my hand for a moment before it slipped away. I went into the National Museum nearby and saw art and history from Japan's past. Swords, paintings, and clothes from long ago filled the halls. I walked quietly, reading the small English signs, learning piece by piece about this country I had always admired. That evening, I decided to try something new. I went into a small restaurant without English menus. I sat at the counter, and the cook smiled at me. I pointed to a dish another customer was eating, and soon a plate of sushi appeared in front of me. I hesitated at first, but then I took a piece. The fish was fresh, the rice soft, and the taste was clean and light. I smiled to myself, thinking, I can do this. I can be brave even here. Later, I walked into a shop and bought a simple postcard of Tokyo Tower. On the back, I wrote a short message to my parents. I am safe. I miss you. Tokyo is more beautiful than I imagined. The next day, I mailed it, knowing it would take weeks to arrive, but wanting them to hold a piece of my journey. Every night in Tokyo, I returned to my small hotel room and looked out of the window. Every night, the city told me the same story in lights. You are not alone. You are growing. You are learning. By the end of my third day, I felt tired but stronger. I had learned how to ride the trains, how to order food, how to ask for help. I still made mistakes, but each mistake became a story, not a failure. As I lay down to sleep, I thought about how far I had come. From a nervous young woman in my hometown to a traveler walking under cherry blossoms in Tokyo. I was beginning to understand that this trip was not only about seeing a new city, it was about seeing myself in a new way. On my fourth morning in Tokyo, I woke with a strange mix of joy and sadness. The joy came from everything I had already seen and done. The sadness came from knowing that my time in this city was passing too quickly. I wanted to hold every moment in my hands, but time slipped away like water. That day, I decided to go to Tsukiji, the famous fish market. It was not as large as in the past, but the energy was still alive. Stalls lined the narrow streets, full of fresh seafood, bowls of rice, and tiny snacks on sticks. The air smelled of salt and soy sauce. I tried grilled squid on a stick. The taste was strong, chewy, and smoky. I laughed quietly at myself. A few days ago, I would never have been brave enough to eat something so new. Walking through the market, I noticed how people moved with purpose. Sellers shouted prices, buyers pointed at fish, and the whole place felt alive with trade. I realized that travel is not only about seeing monuments or famous spots. It is about watching the daily life of a city, how people live, how they eat, how they share space. In that busy market, I felt a quiet respect for Tokyo. Later, I took the train to Shinjuku. The station was enormous, the largest I had ever seen. People moved in every direction like rivers of light. For a moment, I felt lost. My chest tightened, and I thought I might cry. I wanted to ask for help, but the Sugo language barrier stopped me. I stood near a map, trying to make sense of it. Then I remembered something from my first day. I had survived then, and I could survive now. Step by step, I found the right exit, and finally I walked out into the open air. The sky above was wide, and I took a deep breath. In the evening, I visited Tokyo Tower. The tall red structure rose into the sky like a giant candle. I bought a ticket and went up to the observation deck. From there, the whole city spread before me, lights shining like stars. I pressed my hands against the glass and whispered, "I made it." Tears filled my eyes, not of sadness, but of deep pride. For years, I had doubted myself. I had thought I was too weak, too shy, too afraid. But now, standing above Tokyo, I knew I had changed. The next morning, I wanted to see a quieter side of Japan. I took a train to Kamakura, a town by the sea, about an hour from Tokyo. The ride was peaceful, passing houses, green fields, and small hills. When I stepped off the train, the air smelled of the ocean. I walked slowly through streets lined with small shops until I reached the Great Buddha, a giant statue sitting calmly under the open sky. I stood before it, feeling both small and safe. The face of the Buddha was peaceful, as if reminding me to breathe, to accept, to let go. I sat on a bench nearby, eating a simple rice ball I bought from a shop. The sea breeze touched my face, and I thought of home again. I missed my family, but I also knew that I was becoming someone new here, someone they would be proud to know. On my final evening in Tokyo, I returned to Shibuya Crossing. This time, I did not feel nervous. I stood tall among the crowd, waiting for the light to turn green. When it did, I walked forward with hundreds of others. But instead of feeling lost, I felt connected. Each step felt strong. Each step felt like a message to myself. You are ready for the world. I bought a small bowl of ramen at a quiet restaurant and ate it slowly, thinking about my journey. I remembered my shaking hands at the airport, my fear at the security check, my surprise at the taste of sushi, my joy under the cherry blossoms. Each memory was a piece of a larger picture, the picture of my growth. That night, in my hotel room, I packed my suitcase. I folded my clothes carefully and placed the small gifts I had bought inside. The lucky charm from Asakusa, the postcard of Tokyo Tower, and a book from the museum. They were not expensive things, but they were full of meaning. As I zipped my bag closed, I sat by the window one last time. The lights of Tokyo sparkled as they had every night. I whispered goodbye, but I also whispered thank you. Thank you for teaching me courage. Thank you for showing me beauty. Thank you for helping me find myself. The next morning, I returned to the airport. This time, I walked with confidence. I knew how to sew, check my bag, how to pass security, how to find my gate. I no longer felt like a child lost in a new world. I felt like a traveler, someone who could move forward without fear. When the plane lifted into the sky again, I looked out at Tokyo becoming smaller below me. My eyes filled with tears, but I was not sad. I knew I would carry this city with me forever. It had changed me, and that change would not disappear. As the clouds covered the city, I closed my eyes and thought about the girl who had been afraid to board a plane. She was still inside me, but she was no longer the strongest part. The strongest part was the woman who had faced Tokyo and found courage in every step. Traveling to Tokyo was not only about a dream, it was about discovering that I could trust myself. I could be alone and still be whole. I could walk through fear and find freedom on the other side. When the plane moved toward home, I held my notebook and wrote one last line. Dream flight to Tokyo, first flight, first fear, first courage. Not the end, but the beginning. If you enjoyed traveling with me, please subscribe for more stories. Share this video with a friend who also dreams of flying for the first time. and tell me in the comments which city would you choose for your dream flight.